Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. The eastern half of the Mediterranean has of course been known as one of the cradles of civilization, endowing mankind with Hellenic, Roman, Egyptian, Ottoman, and Judeo-Christian legacies among others. Yet with culture, there also comes conflict, with ancient hostilities dormant only until they rise up again due to competition or ideology. This seems to be the situation in the eastern Mediterranean today, primarily between Greece and Turkey. Are we headed towards further escalation or conversely towards de-escalation? To analyze the developments in the gas-rich and therefore explosive region, we're joined from Athens, Greece by Professor Dr. Ioannis Nomikos, who is the director at Research Institute for European and American Studies and founding editor at Journal of Mediterranean and Balkan Intelligence. Welcome.
Welcome, Chef.
Also joining us from Istanbul, Turkey is Mr. Yusuf Erim, editor-at-large at Public Broadcast, TRT World. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And with us here in the studio is our TV7 analyst, Mr. Amir Oren. Mr. Oren, give us a broader understanding on the latest developments pertaining to the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean.
So as is well known, a lot of history, a lot of geography also involved. And you know, Turkey as a landmass is 6 times the size of Greece. But when you talk about islands, if you look at the list of the 10 largest islands in the Mediterranean, Greece has 5, while Turkey only 1. And Greece has 11 of the largest 20. So by the incident of geography, if we talk about the Mediterranean and what is included in exclusive economic zones, and is the Mediterranean, as was one said about the Franco-Israeli relationship, a bridge over water, or is it now only a military route in which the two sides are going to meet? This is going to be seen very soon. And if we look at what the American administration, the Trump administration has been doing only recently, we have seen that both Secretary Pompeo and his Assistant Secretary Cooper, who has taken part in strategic affairs, have visited Athens. They have spoken with the Cypriots, and recently there has been also rising tension in Cyprus with the Turk part of Cyprus changing the status quo somewhat. And the Americans have called on the Turkish Cypriots to revert to what has happened. And of course, if you add to that what we know about the gas problems, about Libya, about the alliance of Israel, Cyprus, Greece, Egypt, Italy, and probably France, arrayed against Turkey, you have a very explosive mixture.
Indeed. Mr. Erim, I would like to refer the first question to you. With so many nations joining forces, if you will, with regard to the Eastern Mediterranean in disputing Turkey's claims, which are contentious to a certain degree between Athens and Ankara in particular, what is the Turkish position, and what are those claims that President Erdogan is seemingly repeating with regard to that territory?
Okay. Well, Turkey's claims in the Eastern Mediterranean are very, very basic. Obviously, it's continental shelf claim, and it has the argument that islands cannot have a cutoff effect on coastal projection. It's also claiming that islands lying on the opposite side of a median line drawn between Turkey and Greece in the Aegean cannot create their own maritime jurisdiction beyond territorial waters. Turkey has the largest mainland coastline in the Mediterranean, and as such, it feels that the size of its coastline should be taken into account when delineating maritime jurisdiction. And it also says that Greek islands lying on the Turkish side of this median line distort equity and shouldn't be granted their own exclusive economic zone. And when we look at the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, we see that the principle of the law of the sea is based on equitable distribution. And also, I want to take into a snapshot of what's going on in the Eastern Mediterranean, right off the coast of Antalya, the small island of Castellarizo. It's a very small island, about 10 square miles size, 580 kilometers away from the Greek coast, 2 kilometers near the Turkish coast. But when we look at certain maps, I'm going to touch on the Seville map. While many Greeks say, well, this is not an official map, we do see the Greek foreign minister, Nikos Dendias, and his comments very close to what the Seville map suggests. So we're going to have to take that into account when we look at the Seville map. And the Seville map shows Castellarizo projecting a 40,000 square kilometer exclusive economic zone, basically bottling up the Turkish coast. Now, there's much international jurisprudence and court precedent-setting court cases, whether it be Yemen versus Eritrea, Canada versus France, Romania versus Ukraine, the North Sea case. All these cases and their rulings favor Turkey's view on the Eastern Mediterranean regarding these outlying islands projecting their own exclusive economic zone.
Indeed. Professor Dr. Nomikos, what is the Greek claim, and how do you respond to Turkey's claim specifically with regard to the island and the various precedents that were just mentioned by Mr. Erim?
Well, first of all, we need to understand, that Mr. Erdogan right now is moving very paradoxically regarding, Kastellori, which is a Greek island. And of course, Greece, should have already, made an exclusive economic zone with Cyprus. So, as you know, there is, the Convention of Law and Maritime, in the UN. Greece has signed about that. Turkey has not signed about that. And the way they are doing now, they are extremely aggressive, And anytime we talk about, let's say that we are like to see our neighbor in a good way and discuss about exploratory, talks. Have you seen any exploratory talk right now? What's happened, we went to the European Union to discuss with Turkey. What's happened? Nothing really happened. And Greece and Cyprus, stood up and they said, okay, if we have any willingness to discuss about a neighborhood, let's sit on the table to see what's wrong and what's right. But what's happened? Now we are on alert, militarily, and we are expected to have a warm incident from Mr. Erdogan, from the Turkish point of view, between the 29th of October and the 14th December. I think you cannot really discuss as a neighborhood if there is no willingness to discuss. What I see right now, I see psychological operation, and a kind of blackmail using, Mr. Merkel, the Germany, to drag Greece on the table. Well, let me say something, because I'm coming from the United States and I know exactly what I'm saying. If you want to discuss with someone, you need to respect it, and you need to, to sit on the table and discuss what's going on. You cannot, blackmail. You cannot ask the European Union, to push someone to go there. And of course, I see that the destabilization process inside NATO, because I do believe, that Greece is really, looking forward to find a way to discuss with Turkey, but not on this way, not on the blackmailing. And something else, I do feel that, Turkey has abandoned the West. They have left the West. And right now what I see is like Germany and the Russian is using Turkey as a proxy to destabilize the East Med. The East Med is a national security issue for Israel, for Greece, for Cyprus, for Egypt. So if you like to discuss with a neighbor like Greece and Turkey, you need to be calm. You need to be relaxed. You need to respect, the sovereignty of the other country, and you need to respect the international law. Not by, make every hour, psychological operation or statement against Greece. There's no way to do that. So Mr. Nikos Dendias, the Prime Minister, Mr. Mitsotakis said how we are going to discuss if you are using this kind of statement, and that I feel not welcome to come to you. I feel not the press to discuss. All right, so the Greek forces on alert from July until now. Is there any way to see this kind of discussion? Unfortunately, no.
Indeed. Professor Dr. Nomikos, I'd like to hear Mr. Erim's response to your positions. And beyond that, there was a meeting at the sidelines of a summit in Europe between the foreign minister of Greece, Dendias, and his Turkish counterpart, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, during which they did agree about setting a time, which was basically Mr. Çavuşoğlu noted that Turkey would set the time for exploratory talks to start, after which there were different reports about different things that were happening behind the scenes but didn't really materialize into something of fruition. And then the seismic vessel Örük Reis was redeployed into the Eastern Mediterranean for offshore exploration, with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan mentioning specifically that it was the Greeks who defied their promises and claims. What were those promises and claims that he spoke about in not standing by their word, if I am correct specifically about that? Could you give us a little bit of an understanding? What was the chain of events there from a Turkish perspective, and of course also the response to Professor Dr. Nomikos?
Well, first of all, it looks like exploratory talks are probably going to take place at either the last week of November or the first week of December in Istanbul. That's what I've been hearing from sources. Now, when we look at Çavuşoğlu and Dendias and their talk where they agreed to reopen exploratory talks, I believe it's the 61st round right now. Some of the topics and the agenda of exploratory talks, there's always been a problem with that. Turkey wants to sit down and talk about a wide variety of issues, about 60 issues from what I've heard from sources, while Greece is only interested in just talking about their maritime jurisdiction with Turkey. But unfortunately, maritime jurisdiction is a very broad topic when it's Turkey and Greece at the table because of the unique geography between both countries. Now, after this agreement to pull Oruç Reis and its return back, first of all, we need to know that the new NAVTEX that issued for Oruç Reis is about 10 miles off the Turkish coast. It is 10 miles off the Turkish coast. I know there is a tremendous amount of backlash coming from Greece, but we need to remember that, again, 10 miles off the Turkish coast that the Greeks are contesting. That's absolutely ridiculous. I can almost swim to where the NAVTEX area is. Next of all, Greece issued live drilling, a NAVTEX for a live fire military exercise on Turkey's Independence Day. So this obviously did not play well with Ankara. They were not happy. There is an unwritten agreement between both countries that they will avoid doing military exercises on their national holidays. And as such, Turkey reciprocated by holding its own drill on Greece's Independence Day as well. So this type of rhetoric and these types of reciprocal actions do need to be avoided. The NATO deconfliction mechanism is very, very important because the last thing anybody wants to see, whether it be Athens or Ankara, anyone else in NATO or the transatlantic community, is any type of kinetic engagement between these allies because regardless of being historical rivals, both countries are in NATO. Both countries are coastal neighbors. They'll be neighbors today. They were neighbors 1,000 years ago. They'll be neighbors 1,000 years from now as well. So even though it looks like both sides are very, very far apart, I do believe that exploratory talks will open the channels for dialogue and there can be some agreements reached. There need to be some compromises. Obviously, there are some areas that Turkey will need to compromise as well. Compromise is a two-way street. But I think that certain maximalist claims, especially around the island of Castellarizo and also in the Eastern Mediterranean, that limit Turkey's coastal waters and continental shelf to just a few kilometers. These are definitely areas where Athens is going to have to rethink its strategy if it's going to sit at the table with Turkey.
Professor Dr. Nomikos, I'd like to ask you specifically, In light of EU Council President Charles Michel, who basically set an ultimatum for Ankara to alter its actions in the East Med by December, before such exploratory talks can take place, if Ankara would withdraw the seismic vessel Uruk Reis from the East Med, would you see Athens agree to re-engage in those exploratory talks in light of the latest developments?
Well, that's the point. I mean, if we are going to have another forum, in December, of course, as you realize, I'm a director of an independent think tank. I don't represent the Greek government. This is my personal opinion. But I do believe that Greece, the Greek government has all the willingness to open a discussion with Turkey. But let me remind you something. Let me refresh your memory. For the last 2 decades, we have a continuously violation of the Greek airfare from the Turkish Air Force. And are we a member of NATO? Of course we are a member of NATO. But what the NATO is doing now? I mean, if I use, the word coming from a Mr. Macron phrase that NATO is really clinically dead, I do believe that there is a compromise of the NATO Article 5. Let's just say to you, because I grew up in America, right? I studied in America, all right? What's happening if we have a war incident, which I find it very possible, between, Greece and Turkey before the exploratory talks start in December? What's happened to the Article 5? If two member NATO fight each other. What I see right now is really an unreliable partner, who does not really respect the Article 5 and the NATO protocol, and they create a lot of instability in the southeastern wings of NATO. This is unacceptable. If you are a member of the club, you have to respect all the regulations. And of course, you have to, let me tell you something now. What happened to the S-400? All right, this is outside, the NATO protocol regarding the ammunition. So, all right, let's discuss, but we need to, respect each other. We need to respect the international law. And I see right now, a very unreliable Atlantic alliances, who really does not, try to solve the problem. But, what I see, keep really silent. And I'm very much afraid that if NATO does not, respect the alliances that was founded after the World War II, NATO would not have a serious reason to exist, as we go right now. So you have to realize that Greece and NATO, are 2 NATO members, but I don't see, the 2 members of NATO respect each other. Right now we have, in a few days, a national holiday in Greece, and we are on alert. And I do believe that the war incident is coming from Mr. Erdogan hand. And when I talk about Turkey, I always said Erdogan Turkey. I don't say about Turkey. So this is a different opinion. And I do believe that the destabilization policy that Mr. Erdogan has pursued is going to make, the Aegean crisis and the Eastern Mediterranean, today, Caucasus in Nagorno-Karabakh, and tomorrow is going to be, moving directly to the Balkan. So what we see here, we see more fire, but I don't see a fire brigade to come there. So NATO should be the fire brigade and stabilize the countries. But NATO is looking on the other way, so I don't feel very comfortable about that.
Well, I'd like to bring I'd like to bring our TV7 analyst into the picture as a NATO expert for many years, who traveled to NATO HQ, and you've communicated with most heads of NATO over the years. To what degree is this alliance currently in an all-time low, if you will, with a situation in which 2 allies are at the brink of war, as it seems in today's panel? And do you see the various activities undertaken by Director General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, in which he traveled to Ankara, he met with President Erdogan, he traveled to the Greek capital Athens, he met with the Prime Minister of Greece as well, and they had discussions about finding a deconfliction mechanism, very much the same like other countries have around the world, in order to avoid a frontal conflict. Where is this standing?
With the possible exception of former Yugoslavia, there is no other place in Europe where you have so much emotionalism. You've heard our two distinguished guests, the commentators, who do not represent their governments. They are experts, they are private citizens, but they obviously reflect the mood in their countries. And it doesn't seem as if there is going to be a meeting of the minds without some cool-headed mediation. Now, can NATO serve as the mediator? One doubts it, because NATO itself is looking for a raison d'etre. The Cold War is long over, 30 years. It started looking at what it called out-of-area exploits, including, of course, in the Gulf, in Afghanistan, and 16 years ago at Istanbul, it started the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative. But this is not enough in order to mediate between these two historic rivals. And if you add to that the problem of the islands, which both of our guests have remarked on, look at the Pacific, where the Chinese are now building artificial islands, and then they claim that they have sovereignty over the waters around them in order for them to build bases on the islands. And the Americans are trying to find a legal and political way around it. If after the elections in the United States and next January, when an administration takes place and fills the key posts, if it can turn its attention both to NATO, because over the last 4 years, NATO has not thrived under the current American policy, and then not only NATO itself, but the Greek-Turkish conflict, that may help the two sides solve it. But as we are looking at it now, we are still far from it.
Mr. Arim, I'd like to talk about practical matters. What needs to be happening in Ankara's perspective in order to come to a position of sitting down at the table and hammering things out via diplomacy rather than allowing the guns to blaze?
Well, Ankara has made it very clear that it is ready to engage in diplomacy without any preconditions. This was evident about a month and a half, 2 months ago, when the German Chancellor Angela Merkel called Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, told him to cease maritime activities and drilling activities and give diplomacy a chance, and he agreed to. He pulled the ships back in for maintenance, allowed an opportunity for the Turkish and Greek administrations to talk. They were actually hours away from a joint statement being released when Greece announced its maritime accord with Egypt, which Turkey viewed as dealing in bad faith. Turkey viewed that Greece was using this opportunity to sit down and try to delegitimize its own maritime accord with Libya. So it scrapped the joint press conference press statement, and ever since then it's been a rocky road. But Turkey has said that it's ready to sit down at the table without any preconditions to discuss a wide array of topics. I just want to touch on one more thing. We were talking about NATO with the other guests. I'd like to think that Turkey is the biggest contributor to NATO when we look at what's been going on over the past decade, whether it be Operation Euphrates Shield, killing 3,000 members of the Daesh terrorist organization, whether it be countering Assad, Russia in Syria, whether it be taking out Hezbollah in Idlib, whether it be fighting the forces of the warlord Khalifa Haftar and Russia in Libya, whether it be countering Russia in Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh. We're seeing Turkey do all the heavy lifting when it comes to NATO, but for some reason, we're seeing a lot of finger pointing at Turkey. I don't see any other NATO ally right now doing what Turkey's doing. Is it for its own self-interest? Yes, but when we look at the bigger picture, this is something that the transatlantic alliance is greatly benefiting from.
There are a couple of minutes left. Professor Dr. Nomikos, what needs to be happened? Same question to you.
Yes, well, let me tell you something, what's happening between the Turkish and the Libyan, maritime, agreement is illegal, 100% illegal. What's the role of the Turkish armed forces or the old jihadists and all the Islamic network that has passed, to Libya? They're illegal. What's the business of Turkey doing in Libya right now? I don't understand. I don't see Greeks there. And I don't see Greeks, intervene in Azerbaijan or Nagorno-Karabakh. I don't see, Turkish intervene in Syria for whatever reason they are here. So Greece is a small country, 10 million people. We like diplomacy and we like respect of the international law. And since Greeks join it, NATO, we always pay a fair. All right, Mr. Donald Trump, when he was talking about who is paying, the fees, to NATO, Greece was there, all right? Not like some other state they never pay. I do understand that Turkey is a country, a neighbor to us, but let me tell you something. We have to be straight here, all right? What I say now, I do represent the Greeks who watch in the street, all right? I do represent the Greek people. I speak on behalf of the Greek people right now. Well, if we like to talk, we need to talk as a win-win, all right? Not as a big state to a small state. NATO is not a mediator like the Israeli, commentator said quite well. Now, I don't think so that the mood is good and the chemistry is good to discuss. What I'm really worried, based right now in Greece, that a warm incident is on the way. Mr. Erdogan is looking for the right time, possibly before the USA election, because we have a domestic chaos right now in the USA election. I hope that Turkey is going to use a diplomatic way to discuss with the Greek government, not to use, aggressive military attack on the Greek-Turkish border or on the North Aegean or on any island.
And
so
Professor
I
Dr.
hope that
Nomikos,
Mr. Erdogan will slow down. Thank you, sir.
indeed, this is all the time that we have for today on this contentious topic. I'm sure we will have to revisit it, and we'll be happy to have both of you again on the show. So I'd like to thank Professor Dr. Nomikos, Mr. Erim, and Mr. Oren for being with us here as well today. And I'd like to thank our viewers as well, and we will see you next time.
You just watched TV7 Jerusalem Studio. We encourage you to pray for the challenges raised in today's program. If you were blessed by our production, please consider supporting TV7 Israel. The details of our respective bank accounts for donations from Europe and the United States appear on the screen. Your generosity allows us to continue to serve God's calling, to broadcast content that truly matters through TV7 Israel from Jerusalem.